I am severely disappointed that absolutely nobody got my joke for TANKSgiving with my I'm a Tank shirt. What does that? Wow! Welcome back to the Railways Go Fast. Old Big Mek here, and yes, yesterday was TANKSgiving. Let's get into it. That's right, for my fellow Americans, yesterday was Thanksgiving, and so our video today is going to be Happy TANKSgiving because it's the punniest thing I could think of. Look, I never said we were sophisticated here. It is an orc channel. But we do have a serious topic of discussion, and that is tanks in Warhammer 40,000. Now, Old Big Mek is old enough to remember before Games Workshop ever actually had their own tank kits. In fact, very famously in White Dwarf way back in the day, there was the underarm deodorant stick hover tank, where you literally took an old stick of underarm deodorant and glued a bunch of bits to it and turned it into a hover tank, because that was the kind of thing that you were encouraged to do. Way back in the day, for example, orc battle wagons, they didn't have a kit. In fact, the codex even stated you had to scratch build it and that every battle wagon should be completely different, which was really, really cool. But they did eventually make tanks, and quite a few of them. The original was the first Rhino, very, very, very simple kit. From there, you added spikes to it, became a Chaos Rhino, and then it started getting crazy. Now, there was one kit in particular that came out really early on that you can still buy to this day, and that is, of course, the classic Eldar Falcon. Now, this particular one is a Wave Serpent because it's got the little greebly bits there, but this hull, this top piece, and this bottom piece, these are unchanged from the 1990s, but you know what? It still holds up to this day. This is such an iconic shape and kit, and is so well engineered and really well done. And they did really, really smart things. The clear glass piece that goes on here for the driver, they were able to reuse that on the turret when they added manned turrets. They take this piece and they turn it 180 degrees this way to be the screen on the Warwalker. So yeah, just really, really cool things like that. Obviously, they took and made this the Wave Serpent. The original Wave Serpent was a Falcon where these bits were scratch built, and then the turret was an upside down plastic spoon. That's the kind of cool stuff they used to do. But all things considered, we're really lucky today with the tank kits that we have, because Games Workshop actually does a really, really good job with them. And in fact, that is their kind of number one thing that differentiates them from anybody else trying to break into the hobby. When you look at every other game out there, it's all about minifigures. It's about the actual dudes, but nobody really has vehicles. Now, some of them get a little close. Battletech is obviously fighting robots, but the physical size of them is not very big. Infinity is a really nice one that's got great big giant figures going on, but again, there's no tanks, there's no vehicles, there's no anything big like that. Even ones like D&D, where they have big figures like the dragons and stuff that are quite large size, it's still not the same as cracking open a model kit like this and building yourself a real deal tank. And those vehicles that they have and the proliferation of them across the lineup is probably one of the biggest reasons why Warhammer keeps growing the way that it does. And also one of the reasons why Age of Sigmar doesn't really take off as much, which is something that they've been fixing by adding more and more vehicles or large kind of contraptions into the game to try to entice people that want a centerpiece that isn't just a dragon or a giant. Now, of course, no discussion of tanks in Warhammer 40,000 would be complete without this, the classic Leman Russ, however you want to say it. It is the Imperial Guard main Battletech. Now, this one is a variant. Obviously, it's got a plasma turret on it, and there's a bunch of different variants, and that's one of the things that makes the vehicle kit so cool. You take this same basic hull, you put different weapon sponsons on it and different turrets and main guns, and you come up with different variants that do different things. There's the Executioner that has the twin guns on it. There's ones that are anti-infantry, ones that are anti-tank. There's ones that are very specialized for roles, like this plasma guy. And then they took it a step further. This hull they use for other kits, famously the Chimera more than the others. The Chimera is the basic transport, but it's also an iconic kit in and of itself. That shape is just so Warhammer 40K, with the little extra las cannons sticking out of the back for the troopers to shoot, and the opening case back. They took this kit, put an open top on it, and put a great big giant siege gun on it, and now you have a basilisk. You put a short little mortar on it, and now you've got this really great indirect fire thing to take out blocks of infantry. You could have put a great big giant tank on the back and a flamethrower on the front, and you've got yourself a hellhound. There's open top variants that are like salamander scout vehicles and things like that. So having these different hulls, having these different options allows Games Workshop to make all of these different very large kits that make them really unique on the tabletop hobby space. And that's why the tanks are so stinking cool. Now, while every faction has its tanks, famously the Space Marines have quite a few, in between your basic Rhino that turns into the Predator and all of the different variations, the Land Raider itself, which was kind of the original great big deal tank, the old school one with the metal tracks that went all the way around, very World War I style, was iconic in all of Warhammerdom. In fact, all of Nerddom. Most people, if they saw that, they knew what it was, even if they didn't really follow Warhammer, because it was so bizarre and so weird and so different and so unique for a company like Games Workshop to make something like that. So yeah, the Space Marines have quite a bit. Obviously, Chaos has all their versions too. And now with the Primaris line, you've got all the floating hover tank things and their different variations thereof. You really can't talk about tanks, though, without good old Imperial Guard. Now, this is part of my Imperial Guard collection. This is a old box set from when they did the Apocalypse sets that has, as you see, a bunch of tanks in it. In fact, this particular one has a Leman Russ Demolisher. It's got the short-barreled cannon here, your regular Leman Russ battle tank, and your Chimera. So there were 3 Leman Russes in here. You can make the Exterminator too. I talked about that one a little bit with the twin guns there. You can make 3 different Leman Russes out of this box along with the Chimera. And being able to take an army of primarily tanks or all tanks is something that is very unique. In fact, that uniqueness is one of the big draws that got me into Warhammer 40,000 in the first place, instead of regular classic Warhammer, now known as Old World, or any of the other games that were out there, because there were these vehicles and they were such large size, and you could take a whole army of them, or most of your army of them, for just about every faction. In fact, Orcs have, other than the battle wagon that we've already talked about, all the different speed buggies that we've covered in a bunch of different videos before. Dark Eldar have the Raiders, like the one that we used in the Every Kit is an Orc kit. Eldar have their Falcon Grav tanks and Wraith Knights and things like that. Obviously, there's a lot of walkers. Walkers are definitely a thing as well. But the tanks, the actual vehicles, the tanks, the things that are tracked or fly, that carry other units inside of them, is pretty much a wholly unique Warhammer 40,000 experience. And I think that's something that all of these other companies and all these competitors just don't quite get yet. Like I said, there's been some that have had walkers. There's been some maybe even that have had some vehicles, but not like this. Not a widespread proliferation. Not a very large one. Not centerpiece models. Not whole armies where you can just be a treadhead. And that's part of what makes Warhammer 40,000 so cool. So yeah, for TANKSgiving, I'm going to be working on these tanks because, as you guys saw in the big reveal show from the Warhammer World Championships, Imperial Guard is getting a glow up next year with their Codex release, and the Death Corps of Krieg are coming out in full plastic. Now, I do have a couple of squads of the Kill Team versions, but as I've talked about here on the channel a bunch, my personal Imperial Guard army is a very small Valhallan force from way back in the day when I was a kid that I've been able to add 1s or 2s here or there from to kind of build up, but there's not really a lot of troops, so I have to do a lot of vehicles in order to do that. And then I do have a lot of troops of the older Cadians, the one without the knees pads, but I don't really love them. In fact, here are a bunch of them, just so you don't have to go back and watch other videos. I mean, they're not bad. I've done a bunch of conversion work to them. I've got them in a paint scheme that I like decently enough, but compared to my Valhallans, they just don't have a lot of flavor. In fact, I love the Greatcoat units. Here is my unit of Armageddon Steel Legion that I run in my Snow Army as well, that I quite enjoy. But when this is all the Valhallans you own, it's really hard to make a whole army, hence all the tanks, as you see in the back. So yeah, the addition of the Death Corps of Krieg is going to allow me to actually have some infantry that I truly like and will build and paint and finish to go with all of my tanks for my armored company. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. So this is kind of my big deal for next year. This year I built my Beast Snaga army and have been working on painting it. I still plan on getting that finished out. Once all that is done, my next step is going to be getting this Imperial Guard army up to snuff, including the tanks. And well, that included this big boy right here, the Rogel Dorn. I really, really love this tank model. I love that you can magnetize it and have the two different main guns on it. I love that we know that there's going to be a tank commander in it. Now, this is the only one that I have, but I'm happy with having the one in between this one, and I think I'm up to like 5 Leman Russes, maybe 6. And then you guys saw the Hellhound and a couple of Chimeras. I have a pretty decent selection of tanks for my Imperial Guard army force, and I do intend on using them. That is going to be kind of my whole thing, is having an armored company, very thematic. I'm not sure if it's going to be competitive at all. I don't really care. I'm not much of a competitive player. What I want is to see on the tabletop and see a bunch of different tanks and chassis that really work with each other, with a couple of guys, you know, scattered in between, and really kind of that classic Imperial Guard feeling. So yeah, I'm pretty happy this TANKSgiving. There's a lot to be grateful for when it comes to the stuff coming out for Warhammer 40K, and a lot to be grateful for with you guys watching these videos and interacting. I hope you've had a great holiday. I hope you've had some time to at least spend with your friends, if not your family. And yeah, we'll catch you in the next video. Until then, Wagon!